In today's lesson, lesson 41 in our study of Old Testament history, we'll look at the second 100 years of division. At the conclusion of our last lesson, we made a statement that in one day, Jehu brought to an end both the life of the king of Israel and the king of Judah, to give both nations a chance for a brand new start. Let's read of that today. Let's study about that today. Let's look at Jehu's reign over Israel. This is in two chapters, 2 Kings 9 and 2 Kings 10. In 2 Kings 9, verses 1 to 13, Jehu is anointed to be king over Israel. This is a strange thing. Since the kings of Israel don't follow God at all, since they live in rebellion to God, you would think that God would write them off. Not so. He wants to give Jehu an opportunity. He knows, of course, God knows everything. But he wants to give Jehu an opportunity to be a man of God. So Elisha the prophet takes a young man, one of the young prophets that were learning from Elisha, and says, you take this cruse of oil and you go anoint Jehu to be king over Israel. And you tell Jehu in verse 7, you are to destroy the house of Ahab your master, and I will avenge the blood of my servants the prophets and the blood of all the Lord's servants shed by Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish. I will cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free. I'll make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah. As for Jezebel, dogs will devour her on the plot of ground at Jezreel, and no one will bury her. Then he opened the door and ran. He's afraid of Jehu. But he goes and speaks the word of God, anoints and appoints Jehu to be king over Israel with the assignment to destroy all of Ahab's house. If you read on, beginning in verse 14, he kills on the field of battle both Jehoram, the king of Israel, and Ahaziah, the king of Judah, on the same day. And the king of Judah, Ahijah, is carried back to Jerusalem and is buried with the rest of the kings. But now he must do what God said do and completely destroy the house of Ahab. He rides into the city of Samaria, and Jezebel, knowing he's coming, dresses herself up. Now she's an old woman, and her words are not going to be words of trying to tempt Jehu. She's dressing for burial. In her pride, she knows Jehu's going to kill her. But in her pride, she wants to look good. So people will say, that's Jezebel. Wasn't Jezebel something? Isn't Jezebel a fabulous queen? Wasn't she a powerful woman? She wants honor even after she is dead. She looks out the window at Jehu and says, is that you, Zimri, the murderer of your master? That's an insult, because Zimri was the Benedict Arnold, the traitor of Israel. Jehu says, is there anybody for me? And two eunuchs looked out the window. He said, throw her down. They threw her down to the ground, and that probably killed her. But Jehu trod her under the feet of his horse and went in to eat. Then he got to thinking, that's a king's daughter. I shouldn't treat her that way in honor to the king of Sidonia, of Sidon. Go out and bury her. And they went out, and all they could find was her skull and the palms of her hands. The dogs had eaten the rest. And that's just there as a witness piece. They didn't eat that simply because God didn't want them to eat that. That's to testify that that's Jezebel. Nobody's going to be able to attend her funeral. Nobody's going to be able to even attend her burial. This lady will not be buried. All that's left of her is the skull with no meat on it and the palms of her hands with no meat on that. Now, if you want to find Jezebel, by the way, God had prophesied that Jezebel will be spread as dung on the field. That's not a figure of speech. That literally happens. If you want to find the rest of Jezebel, follow those dogs. And where they excrete, point at that excretion and say, that's Jezebel. That's deity to dog's dung in one single day. The lady has had her payday. But Jehu's not through yet. He goes to the city of of Ahab's sons and slays all 70, or has slain all 70 of Ahab's sons. He seized 70 heads as proof that Ahab's sons and grandsons and all of his slaves, every male in Ahab's house, is wiped out. But he's still not through. The woman is dead. All of Ahab's house is dead. But the woman and the man have put something in Israel that must be removed. If Jehu is to have a new start, if Jehu is to have the opportunity of leading Israel out of the bondage that Ahab and Jezebel had placed them in, there's still one thing for him to do. He must wipe out the worship of Baal. They can't just go kill them because they're too powerful and they're scattered over all the land. And they would hide, as the prophets of God had, in caves, and he would not be able to kill all the priests of Baal. And if you don't get rid of all the seed, the crop can come back up. So here's what Jehu does. He says, Ahab served Baal just a little bit, but Jehu's going to really serve him. I mean, he's going to offer to Baal a sacrifice that Ahab had never thought about worshiping. I will be the true and the exemplary worshiper of Baal. Let all the worshipers, let all the priests of Baal gather together in Baal's great temple here in Samaria. And the word went all over the land. And all the priests of Baal and all the worshipers of Baal were brought into the house of Baal in the city of Samaria. Then Jehu enters the house. And he says, I want nobody here but the true worshipers of Baal. Anybody here that worships Jehovah, drive them out. Don't let them be in here. I don't want anybody but the faithful worshipers of Baal here. And all the worshipers of Jehovah that were maybe trying to curry Jehu's favor, who were a little weak, were driven out of the temple of Baal. And then Jehu said, close the doors. And all the doors were shut up. Then he surrounded that temple with his army. And his army destroyed, killed all the priests of Baal and all the worshipers of Baal in one day. And nothing that Jehu has done so far was anything but what God wanted done. The king of Israel is dead. The king of Judah is dead. Jehu is dead. All the sons of Ahab are dead. All the worshipers of Baal and all the priests of Baal are dead. He has swept the land clean. But you'll read in chapter 10, his heart was not right with God. He didn't do that because he's wanting to do God's will. God wanted it done. It was God's will it be done. It was God's will Jehu do it. But Jehu didn't do it for that reason. You see, our service to God is dictated finally and ultimately by what's in our heart. Jehu was not serving God. He was serving himself. And the proof of that is, the text says, yet he bowed down and worshiped the idols of Jeroboam. He walked in the sin of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. That was a cancer, incurable, from the day that it was placed in Israel's bosom. The nation had deadly cancer from the word go. Jehu has not done the will of God totally, but he's done 4 things God wanted done. He's killed both king of Israel and Judah. He's slain Jezebel. He's killed the sons of Ahab, and he's purged the land of the Baal worship. So God says, because you've done those 4 things, 4 of your sons will sit on the throne reigning in Israel. The laborer is worthy of his hire, even when the laborer is not a righteous man of God. God will pay Jehu for the service Jehu has rendered God. Had he served God, had he turned from the worship of the calves of Jeroboam, had he purged the land of that, his dynasty would have been as secure in Israel as David's was in Judah, but he did not. So only 4 of his sons will sit on the throne. And it's interesting that the 4th one, Zechariah, only reigns for 6 months, as if God said, finally, I don't have to keep my word to this ungodly land. But God wants Jehu to know that he's not in his will. He might think that he's in his will since he's promised him 4 sons upon the throne. He goes out to fight against Hazael. I told you we'd get to him. Hazael, the king of Syria. And Hazael defeats Jehu time and time again. When he's doing God's will, He's always victorious. As soon as he refuses to worship Jehovah, he won't worship Baal. He refuses to worship Baal. But when he refuses to worship Jehovah, then he begins to lose. That's by covenant. We're never away from the covenant of Deuteronomy 28, the covenant of blessing and cursing. Because Jehu did God's will, he was blessed, even when he didn't do it with a perfect heart. When he didn't do God's will, he's cursed by defeat at the hand of Hazael, the king of Syria. But now down in Judah, on the same day that Israel lost a king and Jehu began to reign, Judah lost a king. What happened there? Well, you read of that in 1 Kings chapter 11. The wicked daughter of Jezebel, Athaliah, had married Jehoram, the king of Judah. When she hears that Ahaziah, her son, was dead, she slew, the text says in 2 Kings 11, she slew all of the seed royal. Now, if there's a period there, the seed has been destroyed and the devil is won. But there's a comma. Except Joash, whom Jehosheba, the queen's servant, took and hid, being 1 year old. Just one son of David is left. She killed all of the other of the royal house, all of David's children, except one little baby, 1 year old. And that one will be the one through whom the Christ will come. As long as Joash is a baby, Athaliah rules in Jerusalem on the throne. She's a woman. She's a usurper. She's not of David's family. She is an evil Baal worshiper. But for 7 years, she controls Judah. I don't think God ever recognized her. I don't believe God ever placed her on the throne. But she usurped the throne that rightly belonged to Joash and put herself in the place of being the ruler of Israel. She's finally slain by the people during an insurrection led by Jehoiada the priest, who presented Joash when he was 7 years old. And all the people were grateful because they were tired of being ruled by this ungodly woman. And they said, "Long live the king." And during Jehoiada's helping time of Joash, he restores the worship of God. With the death of Athaliah, Joash begins to reign over Judah. Joash is a weak person. He's going to do whatever he is led to do. And as long as Jehoiada the high priest is alive, Joash does reign. But as soon as Jehoiada the high priest dies, Joash forsakes the Lord and slays Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, as if to say, "I am no longer under this man's control." Perhaps he chafed at having to be righteous when his heart wanted to do evil. He gave all the temple treasures to Hazael, king of Syria, to keep him from coming and defeating his nation and taking the city of Jerusalem. I've always been amazed at the stupidity of that. I mean, when I send my gold to a king to keep him from coming and conquering me, doesn't he know I've got more? Doesn't he know I have more gold? And am I not admitting that I cannot defeat him by sending the bribe? As soon as he spends that money, as soon as he receives that money, surely he's going to think, he's got more gold. All I've got to do is move toward him again, and he'll either give me the gold or I'll defeat him and take all of his gold. Joash is not a righteous man, and is not smart. He is slain by his own servants. They got tired of his wickedness. And his own servants slay him. And he's buried in Jerusalem, but not buried with the other kings. His servants in Judah are wanting all of the world to know, we don't recognize this man as the one that is to take the righteous lead of the people. He's nearly as bad as his mother Athaliah. During this period of time that Joash is on the throne of Judah, Jehoahaz is on the throne of Israel. You read this in 2 Kings 13, verses 1 to 9. This is the closest to a good king that Israel had. It's the only king of Israel that ever called on Jehovah. And because he did, God gave him victory over his enemies. God is immediately blessing this man. Why? He called on God. He prayed to God. He trusted God temporarily, not fully, because it says he continued to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, wherewith he made Israel to sin. He wasn't able to escape the cancer, but for a momentary time in Israel's history, a king called on Jehovah, and Jehovah immediately blesses him. And he saves Israel, Jehoahaz does, saves Israel from destruction by the Syrians, and then he dies. And Jehoash, his son, reigns over Israel. He doesn't call on Jehovah. He goes back immediately to the refusal ever to pray, ever to seek God, ever to trust God. I'm saying that because that's a tragedy for God's people to become so hard-hearted and so worldly that they do not pray. A man's value is not so much determined by what he knows as by who he knows. These people knew about God, but they didn't know God. They knew the Word of God, but they didn't know the God of the Word. They knew the law of God, but they didn't know the lawful God. They did not know Jehovah. They continued to bow down to wood and stone. Jehoash warred constantly with Judah, with the king we'll study next, Amaziah, who is a righteous man, but not with a perfect heart. You got a wicked man in Israel and a partially righteous man in Judah during this period of time, and they war with one another. There's no indication as to which one is winning. Perhaps neither. Perhaps they're just having skirmishes and guerrilla warfare. But that is teaching them what? You're not in my will. Because if you're perfectly in my will, you can't lose a battle. There's not one enemy that can stand before you. You get total blessing if you just do my will. By covenant, both Israel and Judah know that they're outside of the will of God. This man, Jehoash, visits Elisha while Elisha is dying. At least he honors to that degree the prophet of God. So the prophet honors him. And he says, take arrows in your hand. And he did. He said, smite the ground. And he smote the ground 3 times. And the prophet's mad. He said, you shouldn't have stopped smiting. Had you continued to smite, you'd have total victory over the Syrians. Now you'll only win 3 battles. When I read that the first time, I said, well, how do you know to keep smiting? What did the prophet tell him? Smite. What should he have done? He should have been smiting until the prophet said, stop. I mean, when God tells you to do something, how long do you do it? Until God says, stop. When there's good, righteous things to do, when do you quit doing them? You never quit doing them. Here's a man that had partial faith in the prophet. Had he waited until the prophet said stop, Syria had been totally destroyed. But because he honored the prophet, he at least gets 3 great victories over Syria. So he is a powerful king because of a momentary honor given to the prophet of God. Now during his time, you'll read this in 2 Kings 14 and in 2 Chronicles 25, Amaziah rules in Judah. Now Amaziah does right, the text says. He keeps the law, but not with a perfect heart. He's observing God's law externally. He's honoring God with his lips, but his heart is not in what he's doing. Friend, remember the most important thing. It's not that the deed is not important, but the more important thing than the deed performed is the heart behind the deed. We need to make sure that our heart's right with God. And that'll take care of all that we do, won't it? All that we say, won't it? Because out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. And what a man thinks in his heart, that's what he is, and that's what he does. We need to make sure that we're not an Amaziah. That is, those who keep the law but have no heart in it. He went down and defeated Edom. But he took the gods of Edom home to worship. That's stupid. I mean, if I've defeated a nation, why am I going to worship their gods? Their gods were not able to deliver them. My God enabled me to defeat them. Why would I start worshiping their gods? For a simple reason. It allowed me to do what I wanted to do. I had a heart in what the gods of Edom wanted, that is sin and immorality. And I had no heart in what God wanted, and that is His will done and his law kept. He warred, therefore, against Jehoash of Israel, and he was defeated. God is telling him, I'm not on your side. Jehoram, the king of Israel, broke down the temple walls. He took out of the temple the gold and the silver and the other treasures. This is no stranger. This is a brother ransacking my house. Amaziah was a good man externally, but an evil man internally. During his reign, Jeroboam the second, the Bible doesn't call him Jeroboam the second, but he's the second Jeroboam. Jeroboam the second had a powerful rule over Israel, only in 7 verses, 2 Kings 14, 23 to 29. He restored the borders of his land to the point that it was when Solomon died, from the river of the Euphrates to where his land joined Judah's. He has all of the promised land in the north under his possession. Jonah is a prophet during his time, and Jonah predicted in 2 Kings 14:25 that that's exactly what he did. Jeroboam brought to Israel political peace and material prosperity. In our next lesson, we're going to study the prophets Amos and Hosea, who prophesied to Israel during Jeroboam's reign. And they will show not only the material prosperity, but the exceeding prosperity, the riches, the luxury that brought idleness and ease to Israel. That's not good. We can have too much of a good thing, right? I mean, material prosperity is good, but the degree that Jeroboam had it was not good. Jeroboam was not a righteous man, a powerful man. You know, when evil men fight evil men, whoever's the more powerful of the two will win. And Jeroboam was a powerful king. His name is in many of the inscriptions of Assyria and other nations round about, because he brought wealth and physical health to Israel. During that same period of time, in 1 Kings 15 and in 2 Chronicles 26, a good king, rules in Judah. His name in 1 Kings is Azariah. His name in 2 Kings, is Azariah. His name in 2 Chronicles is Uzziah. He's only 16 years old when he begins to reign, but he's already seeking God. He seeks God from his youth. Because he was a God seeker, he put down all of his enemies. He put down Edom, he put down Moab, he put down the Philistines, he put down the Arabians. He destroyed all of his enemies, and he extended his border to the river of Egypt. So in Uzziah's day in the south, and in Jeroboam's day in the north, the people of God again rule all the promised land. The people of God are again in a day of political peace and material prosperity. He is a wise man, Uzziah is. He promotes not industry, but husbandry and agriculture. He sends the people back to the land. He sends the people back to the crop. When I was in high school, studied a course named Civics. And in this course called Civics, we studied what made nations powerful and what makes materially a nation secure is agriculture. And in one of the books I read this line, that agriculture is the backbone of any nation. Any nation that does not have a strong emphasis on the farmland and on ranching of cattle and sheep and other things is a nation with no backbone. It is a nation that cannot stand long. Israel is an industrial nation. Judah is being brought back to strength by Uzziah's promoting of husbandry. However, even the best make mistakes. Uzziah, late in his life, for some reason, decided that he would presume to do what only a priest should do. He went into the temple, into the holy place, to offer sacrifice. And because he did that, he's smitten with leprosy. And he spends the last days of his life shut up in his own infirmary, in a hospital, not able to go about among the people, not able to be seen as king, as God is again trying to declare to Judah, you're not pure. In spite of Uzziah's reformation, In spite of Uzziah's trying to make it right, in spite of Uzziah's victories over the enemies, in spite of Uzziah's great promotion of the land and of husbandry, in spite of all that, you're still not in my will. He died a leper. Then the last son, during his reign, the last son of Jehu comes to the throne. In 1 Kings chapter 15, verses 8 to 12. His name is Zechariah. Like the rest of Israel's kings, this is a wicked man. This is a man who follows the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that cancer that is still eating at their core. And so he reigns only a short period of time, and he is slaughtered. He dies. And Jehu's dynasty comes to an end. As we end this second 100 years of division, we're at the end of strength. We're at the end of a time when Israel or Judah can be blessed. And we're about to enter a period of anarchy. This is a great period prophetically. And in our next lesson, we're going to study 4 or maybe 6 of the great prophets of God who were called to try to get Israel and to try to get Judah to see the way of the Lord and continue to be able to live in a day of political peace and material prosperity. Let's see if they'll hear the Word of God. Next time.